When the laser-cut titanium key hit the oak table, it sounded like a death knell. Michael, who had been rambling about nursing homes, suddenly went silent. His face turned paper white because he knew exactly what that key opened. He realized that after 40 years as a locksmith, I knew every dirty secret he had buried. Before I tell you how I trapped him and his mistress, please subscribe. This story is a warning to anyone who thinks blood cannot be poisonous. My name is Robert Brown, and for the last 40 years, I have made a living keeping people out of places they do not belong. I am a master locksmith and a security specialist, formerly the lead consultant for Titan Fortress Solutions. When you spend 4 decades studying how to breach the most secure vaults in America, you stop looking at the world like a normal person. You do not see doors, you see latch assemblies and strike plates. You do not see windows, you see tempered glass and weak locking mechanisms. And you certainly do not see people. You see variables. You see potential threats. You see the desperate, the greedy, and the careless. That Tuesday afternoon, standing in line at the grocery store, I was looking at all three. I was 64 years old, retired in title only, and standing in checkout lane number 4 with a basket containing a loaf of sourdough bread, a carton of eggs, and a bottle of vitamins. It was a mundane errand, the kind that usually numbs the mind, but my brain never really shuts off. I was watching the security guard near the automatic sliding doors. He was a kid, barely 20 years old, leaning against the sensor rail with his eyes glued to his smartphone. He had zero situational awareness. If I had wanted to walk out with a cart full of steaks, I could have done it. If someone wanted to walk in with a weapon, they would have been halfway to the pharmacy before he even looked up. It was pathetic. We live in a world that pretends to be safe, hiding behind illusionary barriers that crumble the moment you apply the right amount of tension. The line moved slowly. The cashier was a middle-aged woman named Linda, according to her name tag. She moved with the lethargy of someone who had given up on urgency 10 years ago. Ahead of me, there was a young woman. She could not have been more than 25, but she looked like she had lived 1,000 years of bad luck. She was thin, painfully, so wearing a gray hoodie that was 2 sizes too big, and fraying at the cuffs. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, strands of brown falling over a face that was devoid of makeup and full of exhaustion. In the cart seat, a baby was fussing, kicking its little legs against a plastic wrapper. I watched her place her items on the belt: a loaf of the cheapest white bread, a jar of peanut butter, and a large canister of baby formula, the premium kind, the hypoallergenic brand that costs a fortune. I knew that brand. I remembered buying it for my son Michael 30 years ago when he had colic. I remembered the price tag even back then, and inflation had not been kind. Linda rang up the items. The beep of the scanner was rhythmic and dull. "That will be $42.50, Linda said, her voice flat. The young woman, whose name I would later learn was Maya, flinched. She dug into her pocket and pulled out a debit card that looked like it had been through the wash a dozen times. Her hands were shaking. Not a subtle tremble, but a violent vibration that rattled the plastic card against the terminal. She inserted the chip. We waited. The silence in the line was heavy. The guy behind me sighed loudly, checking his watch, clearly annoyed that his schedule was being disrupted by someone else's poverty. A harsh buzz sounded from the machine. Declined. Maya stared at the screen, her face flushing a deep, humiliated crimson. "I am sorry," she whispered, wiping the card on her hoodie, as if dirt was the problem, and not an empty bank account. "Let me try again, please." She inserted it again. Another buzz. Declined. "I can take the bread and peanut butter off," Linda offered, her hand hovering over the void button. "No," Maya said, her voice cracking. She looked at the formula, then at her baby. The child let out a sharp cry, hungry and impatient. "I need the formula. He needs it. Please just try it one more time." I watched the scene unfold with a clinical detachment that slowly gave way to something else. I looked at Maya's shoes, canvas sneakers worn down at the heel, wet from the rain outside. I looked at her, knuckles white from gripping the cart handle. I saw a mother at the end of her rope, and for a fleeting second, the image superimposed itself over a memory of my wife Sarah. We had been poor once. Dirt is poor. Before the contracts with the banks, before Titan Fortress Solutions, before the big house on the hill. I remembered Sarah counting pennies on the kitchen table, crying because we had to choose between heat and meat. I could not stand there and watch this. It was not about being a hero. It was about order. It was about fixing a broken tumbler so the lock could turn. I stepped forward and slid my black credit card into the machine before Maya could protest. The machine beeped a happy affirmative chirp. Approved. "Keep the receipt," I told Linda. Maya spun around, her eyes wide. "Sir, no, I cannot let you do that. That is over $40. "It is handled," I said, my voice gruff. I was not good with gratitude. I spent my life dealing with steel and tumblers, not emotions. "Feed the kid. That is all that matters." She looked at me, and for a moment the fear in her eyes was replaced by a profound confusion. She looked like she wanted to cry, but she held it back. She nodded, unable to speak, and quickly bagged her items. I paid for my own groceries and followed her out. I told myself I was just going to my car, but instinct made me watch her. She was struggling to push the cart and hold the baby at the same time as she navigated the wet pavement toward an old rusted sedan parked in the far corner of the lot. "Let me get that," I said, catching up to her. I grabbed the formula from the cart. She froze. She looked around the parking lot, her head snapping left and right, like a prey animal sensing a predator. The parking lot was mostly empty, save for a few cars, and the cart return boy gathering strays 3 lanes over. "Thank you," she said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. She opened the back door of her car and strapped the baby in. Then she turned to me. She did not take the formula immediately. Instead, she stepped into my personal space far closer than a stranger should. I was tense. My hand instinctively moved toward the tactical pen I kept in my pocket. Old habits died hard. "Mr. Brown," she whispered. I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. She knew my name. I had not introduced myself. My credit card had been in the machine for 2 seconds, too fast for her to read. She grabbed the formula from my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I saw terror there. Real, unadulterated terror. "Check your mailbox tonight," she hissed, her lips barely moving. "Do not let anyone see you do it. Not him. Especially not him." "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice low and dangerous. "How do you know my name?" "Just check the box," she said. She jumped into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and turned the key. The engine sputtered and coughed before roaring to life with an unhealthy rattle. She peeled out of the parking lot, leaving me standing there next to a discarded shopping cart, the smell of exhaust fumes hanging in the humid air. I drove home with one hand on the wheel and the other checking the rearview mirror every 30 seconds. Paranoia is an occupational hazard in the security business, but this was different. This was personal. She knew me. She knew something I did not. My house sat on a hill overlooking the city. It was a beautiful structure, a testament to my success. High walls, wrought iron gates, security cameras covering every angle. It was supposed to be my sanctuary, the place I would grow old in peace. But lately, it felt less like a home and more like a waiting room for the grave. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw Michael's car parked in the front. A sleek black sports car that I had paid for. Michael was my only son. 32 years old, handsome, charming, and utterly useless when it came to earning an honest dollar. He called himself an entrepreneur, but mostly he just moved my money around. I walked into the house, disabling the perimeter alarm with a code only I knew. The living room was expansive, filled with furniture that Veronica, Michael's fiancée, had picked out. It was all white leather, and chrome cold and sterile. "Dad, you are back," Michael's voice boomed from the kitchen. He walked out, holding a glass of red wine. It was 2 in the afternoon. He was wearing a polo shirt that cost more than that girl's entire car. Veronica followed him smiling, that plastic smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Hi, Robert," Veronica cooed. She was beautiful in a sharp, manufactured way. "We were just talking about you." "Were you now?" I asked, setting my grocery bag on the counter. I watched them. I watched them the way I watched the security guard at the store. I looked for the tells. "We were just discussing the estate plan again," Michael said, leaning against the marble island. He took a sip of wine. "You know, with your health and everything. Veronica found this amazing facility in Sarasota. Assisted living but luxury. Like a resort. They have round-the-clock medical staff." "I am 64, Michael," I said, keeping my voice even. "I am not 90, and my health is fine." "But the dizzy spells, Dad?" Michael pressed his brow, furrowing with feigned concern. "You have been complaining about headaches and nausea for weeks. We are just worried. We do not want you alone in this big house if something happens." I looked at him. Really looked at him. I saw the slight tension in his jaw, the way his fingers tapped nervously against the wine glass. I saw Veronica glancing at him, a subtle check-in, ensuring they were on script. "I will think about it," I lied. "Right now I am tired. I am going to rest." "Do you want me to bring the groceries?" Veronica offered. "No," I said sharply. "I can handle a loaf of bread, Veronica." I took my bag and went upstairs. I locked my bedroom door. I did not rest. I sat in my armchair by the window and watched the driveway. I watched the sun go down. I watched the shadows lengthen across the lawn. My head was throbbing, a dull ache behind the eyes that had become my constant companion over the last month. Michael called it old age. The doctors called it stress. But after the encounter in the parking lot, my gut was calling it something else entirely. I waited until midnight. The house was silent. I knew Michael and Veronica were in the guest wing on the other side of the house. I could verify this because I had checked the internal motion sensors on my phone. They were in their room. I moved through the hallways like a ghost. I did not turn on any lights. I knew every creak of the floorboards, every angle of the furniture. I disarmed the front door alarm, slipped out, and closed it silently behind me. The night air was thick and humid. Crickets were chirping in the bushes. I walked down the long driveway to the brick pillar where the mailbox was embedded. "Check your mailbox tonight. Do not let anyone see." I reached into the metal box. It was empty except for a single, small envelope. It was plain white. No stamp. No return address. No name. It had been placed there by hand. I pulled it out and felt something hard inside. I did not open it there. I walked back to the house, keeping to the shadows, avoiding the sweep of the security lights I had installed myself. I went straight to my study, a room Michael rarely entered because he found the smell of old books and machine oil boring. I sat at my desk and turned on the small banker's lamp. I took a letter opener and split the envelope. I tipped it over. A single object slid out and clattered onto the oak desk. It was a key. But it was not just any key. I picked it up, feeling the cold weight of the metal. I brought it under the light, putting on my magnifiers. I examined the profile. It was a rotating disc cylinder key. Specifically, it was an Abloy Protect 2. My breath caught in my throat. To the average person, a key is a key. But to me, this was a statement. The Abloy Protect 2 is the gold standard of high-security locking mechanisms. It uses angled cuts on the key blade to rotate discs inside the cylinder. It is virtually unpickable. It is drill-resistant. You do not buy a lock like this at the local hardware store. You do not use a key like this for a gym locker or a front door. This was a key for a vault, or a high-security deposit box. I turned the key over in my fingers. Stamped on the head of the key was a series of numbers 305, and below that, a tiny laser-etched logo that I recognized instantly. A stylized shield with an iron gate. It was the logo for Ironclad Storage. I knew the place. It was a private, off-the-grid storage facility downtown. The kind of place that did not ask questions, did not require ID, if you had the key, and catered to people who had things to hide. Expensive things. Illegal things. Why did the girl from the grocery store give me this? How did she have it? And what was inside box 305 that was so important she risked approaching me in public? I looked at the key, and then I looked at the photo of Michael and me on my desk, taken when he was 10 years old. He was smiling, holding a fish he had caught. "Check your mailbox." My headache flared again, a sharp spike of pain. I looked at the closed door of my study, then toward the wing of the house where my son was sleeping. The girl's fear was contagious. She was terrified of someone. Especially not him, she had said. I gripped the key tight enough to leave an impression in my palm. The mechanism of my mind began to turn, clicking into place, like the tumblers of a safe. I did not know what was in box 305, but I knew one thing for certain. Tomorrow morning I was going to open it, and I had a terrible feeling that whatever was inside was going to shatter my world faster than a sledgehammer against glass. The sun was barely up when I walked into the kitchen the next morning, but the humidity was already clinging to the windows, like a second skin. I was dressed in my Sunday best, a charcoal suit that I usually reserve for funerals or board meetings, though today felt like a little bit of both. Michael was sitting at the island, nursing a protein shake, looking every bit the concerned son he pretended to be. "You are up early," he said, wiping his mouth. "Do you want some coffee? Veronica just brewed a fresh pot." I looked at the coffee machine, a high-tech chrome monstrosity that probably cost more than my first car. I looked at the steam rising from the carafe. Yesterday, I would have poured a cup without thinking. Today, all I could see was a potential delivery system for sedatives or worse. "No coffee," I said, patting my stomach. "Dr. Evans wants me fasting for blood work. I have that checkup at 9, remember?" It was a lie, of course. My doctor was named Evans, but I did not have an appointment until next month. It was a simple social engineering tactic. Give a specific detail, like a name or a time, to make the deception feel solid. "Write the checkup," Michael said, nodding. "Do you want me to drive you? You have seemed a little unsteady on your feet lately." "I can drive myself, Michael," I snapped, perhaps a little too sharply. I softened my tone. "I need independence. Use it or lose it, right?" He shrugged, feigning indifference, but I saw his eyes track me as I grabbed my keys. He was assessing me, calculating how much time I had left. I walked out to my car, a vintage sedan I kept in pristine condition. As I backed out of the driveway, I watched my son in the rearview mirror. He was standing in the doorway watching me leave. A predator watching its prey wander off, confident it would return to the den. I drove toward the city center, but I did not go to the medical district. Instead, I headed for the industrial sector, down by the docks where the old warehouses had been converted into high-end lofts and secure storage facilities. Ironclad Storage was not your typical self-storage unit, with a roll-up door and a padlock. It was a fortress. It was a windowless concrete block that looked more like a bunker than a place of business. I knew the specs of this place because Titan Fortress Solutions had consulted on their perimeter sensors 5 years ago. They used biometric scanners at the entry, seismic sensors in the floors, and a private vault system that rivaled the Federal Reserve. I pulled into the secure parking lot, my heart hammering against my ribs. The headache was back, a dull throb at the base of my skull. For weeks I had attributed it to aging, to stress, to blood pressure. Now, I wondered if it was something else entirely. I walked into the lobby. It was sterile, smelling of ozone and floor wax. The receptionist was behind bulletproof glass, a thick slab of polycarbonate that could stop a .44 Magnum. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked through the intercom. I did not speak. I simply held up the key. Her eyes dropped to the Abloy Protect 2 in my hand. Her demeanor changed instantly. Respect replaced indifference. In the world of security, possession of the key is 9/10 of the law. This specific key profile meant I was a high-tier client. Access anytime, no ID required, total anonymity. It was designed for people who did not want a paper trail. "Vault Room B," she said, buzzing the heavy steel door to my right. "You have 30 minutes." The door clicked open with the heavy thud of a magnetic lock disengaging. I stepped into the corridor. The air was colder here, climate-controlled to preserve documents and sensitive materials. I walked past row after row of steel boxes, scanning the numbers until I found it. Box 305. I stood there for a moment, the silence of the vault pressing in on me. My hands were trembling not from age, but from adrenaline. I took a deep breath, forcing my professional persona to take over. I was not a father right now. I was a technician. I inserted the key. The tactile feedback was exquisite. The Abloy Protect 2 uses a disc detainer system. There are no springs to wear out, no pins to jam. As I turned the key, I could feel the internal discs rotating, aligning the sidebar into the cylinder groove. It was mechanical perfection. It was a system designed to keep the world out. But today, it was letting me in. The lock turned a full 90 degrees. I pulled the small steel door open. Inside, there was no gold, no jewelry, no stacks of cash. There was a thick manila envelope, a spiral-bound notebook, and a black USB drive. I took the items and closed the box. I did not want to examine them here under the cameras. I needed a secure environment. I walked back to my car, tossed the items onto the passenger seat, and locked the doors. I drove 2 miles away to a quiet park overlooking the bay. I killed the engine and sat there, the air conditioning blasting against the Florida heat. I started with the notebook. It was a diary. The handwriting was erratic, rushed, stained here and there with what looked like dried tears. I flipped to the first page, dated 18 months ago. I met him today. Michael. He is charming. He says he builds skyscrapers, but he looks at me like I am the only thing in the room. My stomach churned. I recognized the name immediately. Maya, the girl from the grocery store. I read through the entries, skimming over the early days of romance, the seduction, the promises. Then the tone shifted. Date, 6 months ago. I told him I am pregnant. He did not smile. He turned cold. He said a baby does not fit into the plan. He said his father would cut him off if he had a bastard child with a waitress. Liar, I whispered to the empty car. I would have welcomed a grandchild. Date, 5 months ago. He gave me money for the clinic. He said if I do not get rid of it, he will make my life a living hell. He says he has friends, dangerous friends. I am scared, but I cannot do it. I am keeping the baby. Date, 3 months ago. I ran away. I think he is following me. I saw his car outside my apartment. I have to hide. If anything happens to me, I need someone to know. I closed the diary, my hand shaking so hard, I nearly dropped it. Maya was not a stranger. She was family. She was the mother of my grandson. The boy I had seen in the grocery cart, the one whose formula I had paid for, was my own flesh and blood. Michael had tried to erase them. He had threatened them. I looked at the medical file next. It was a birth certificate and a paternity test. Positive. 99.9% probability. The boy's name was Leo. I had a grandson named Leo. Tears pricked my eyes, but I blinked them away. There was no time for sentimentality. Not yet. I picked up the USB drive. This was the digital evidence Maya had risked everything to keep safe. I pulled my laptop from my bag. I never left home without it, and booted it up. I did not connect to the internet. I inserted the drive. There were folders labeled audio and screenshots. I opened the folder labeled screenshots first. They were text messages between Michael and a contact named Veronica. Michael. The old man is complaining about headaches again. It is working. Veronica. Are you sure the levels are right? We do not want him waking up dead too fast. It needs to look like a gradual decline. Heart failure or a stroke. Michael. I checked the calibration. It is steady. He is breathing it every night. By the time he flatlines, his blood work will just look like oxygen deprivation from sleep apnea. The coroner won't even look twice at a 64-year-old with a history of hypertension. My blood ran cold. I felt the air in the car grow thin phantom fumes filling my lungs. I clicked on the audio folder. There was a file dated 2 weeks ago. I put in my earbuds and pressed play. Michael's voice filled my head. It was clear, arrogant, the voice he used when he thought he was the smartest person in the room. I adjusted the intake valve on the furnace in the master suite, Michael said on the recording. The way the ventilation system is set up, it is a closed loop for his bedroom. I bypassed the safety shutoff. It is leaking carbon monoxide, but just a trace amount. 50 parts per million. Enough to cause confusion, fatigue, nausea. We will ramp it up to 200 parts per million next week. Veronica's voice laughed a sharp, cruel sound. You are a genius, babe. And the best part, he thinks you are fixing up the house for him. He trusts you. He is a dinosaur, Michael replied, his tone dripping with contempt. He spent his whole life building locks, but he forgot to lock the back door. The house, the insurance, the Titan Fortress stocks. It is all going to be ours, V. We just have to wait for him to go to sleep one last time. I ripped the earbuds out of my ears as if they were burning me. I sat there staring at the dashboard, breathing hard. The headaches, the nausea, the fatigue I had been feeling for the last month. It wasn't age. It wasn't stressful. I was being poisoned. My own son, the boy I had taught to fish, the boy I had put through college, was slowly gassing me to death in my own bedroom. He was using his engineering degree, the degree I had paid for, to turn my HVAC system into a gas chamber. He had tampered with the furnace. A construction engineer knew exactly how to modify a valve to bypass safety regulators. Carbon monoxide is odorless, colorless, and tasteless. It is the perfect silent killer. And he was dosing me like a lab rat, increasing the levels slowly, so my body wouldn't trigger a panic response until it was too late. I looked at the medical records again. Maya had saved my life. By giving me this key, she had handed me the antidote to my own murder. A wave of nausea hit me, real and visceral this time. I opened the car door and dry heaved onto the pavement. The betrayal was a physical blow, a punch to the gut that left me gasping. I had spent 40 years securing things, protecting assets, keeping bad people out. But I had made the classic mistake, the one every rookie security guard gets warned about on day one. The threat isn't always outside the gate. Sometimes the threat has a key to the front door. I wiped my mouth with a handkerchief and sat back up. The sadness was evaporating, burned away by a white-hot rage that was rising from the pit of my stomach. They wanted me dead. They wanted my money. They wanted to erase my grandson and dance on my grave. Okay, I said aloud. My voice is steady now, cold. You want to play Engineer Michael. You want to talk about closed loops and safety shutoffs. I looked at the abloy key in my hand one last time before slipping it into my pocket. I started the car. I was going home. But I wasn't going home to die. Michael thought he was the architect of my demise. He thought he was smart. But he had forgotten who taught him how to hold a screwdriver. He had forgotten that before you can build something, you have to understand how to take it apart. He wanted a fortress. I would give him one. I would give him the most secure, impenetrable fortress on Earth. And I would make sure he never ever left it. I pulled out of the parking spot, the tires crunching on the gravel. The plan was already forming in my mind, complex and intricate, a master key system of revenge. It was time to show my son the difference between a construction worker and a master locksmith. It was time to engage the deadbolt. Driving back up the winding driveway to my estate felt like driving into the mouth of a beast that had been waiting patiently to swallow me whole. The house stood on the hill, white and pristine against the Florida sky, a monument to 4 decades of hard work, sleepless nights, and the relentless pursuit of security. I had built those walls to keep the world out. I had installed the reinforced glass to withstand hurricanes. I had wired every window with sensors to detect the slightest vibration. But as I parked my vintage sedan next to Michael's aggressive sports car, I realized the bitter truth of my profession. You can build a fortress against thieves, against storms, against armies, but there is no alarm system in the world that can detect the rot growing inside your own bloodline. I turned off the ignition and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, until my knuckles turned white. My head was pounding. It was that same dull, throbbing ache behind my eyes that had become my constant companion over the last 6 weeks. I had attributed it to hypertension. I had blamed it on the stress of retirement. I had even let Michael convince me it was the early onset of something cognitive, a terrifying slide into dementia. Now, sitting in the driveway, I took a deep breath of the filtered car air and realized that the headache was not a symptom of age. It was a symptom of murder. Walking to the front door required an act of will I did not know I possessed. I had to walk into that house and look at my son, the boy I had taught to tie his shoes, the teenager I had bailed out of trouble more times than I could count, and pretend that I did not know he was actively trying to kill me. I entered the foyer. The air inside the house was cool conditioned to a perfect 72 degrees, but it smelled stale to me now. It smelled of treachery. "Dad, is that you?" Michael walked out of the living room. He was wearing a casual linen shirt sleeves, rolled up looking every inch the relaxed, successful air. He smiled when he saw me, a reflex of facial muscles that I now saw for what it was, a mask. "I was getting worried," he said, walking over to take my jacket. "You were gone a long time for a simple checkup. Dr. Evans keep you waiting." I looked at him. I really looked at him. I searched his face for traces of the toddler who used to fall asleep on my chest, or the boy who cried when his goldfish died. They were gone. In their place was a man who looked at his father and saw nothing but a check that was taking too long to clear. "Just routine," I muttered, letting him take the jacket. I rubbed my temples, playing the part he had written for me. The waiting room was full, and this headache, it is splitting today. Michael's expression shifted instantly to one of practiced concern. "I told you, Dad. It is the stress. You are managing too much. Here, come sit down. Veronica made some herbal tea. It will help." He guided me into the living room like I was an invalid. Veronica was sitting on the white leather sofa, scrolling through her phone. When she saw me, she brightened up, placing the phone face down on the coffee table. "Robert, you look exhausted," she cooed. She stood up and kissed my cheek. The scent of her perfume hit me like a chemical weapon. It was heavy floral, and expensive Chanel, I believe. I used to think she wore it because she liked the smell. Now, as I held my breath, I wondered if she wore it to mask the other scents in the house, or perhaps to cover the stench of her own morality. Her eyes scanned my face not with affection, but with a calculation that chilled me. She was checking for signs of decline. She was looking for the gray pallor of oxygen deprivation. "I am fine," I said, sinking into the armchair. "Just tired." Michael poured a cup of tea from a porcelain pot. "Drink this. It is chamomile, good for the nerves." I took the cup. The steam rose up innocent and warm. I stared at the amber liquid. A month ago, I would have drunk it with gratitude. Today, I wondered if this was part of the regimen. But then I remembered the recording, the intake valve, the closed loop. They did not need to poison my tea. The air I breathed was doing the work for them. I took a sip, forcing myself to swallow. "Thank you, son." Michael sat opposite me, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. "Dad, while you were out, Veronica and I were talking. We really think we need to revisit the power of attorney paperwork, especially with these headaches getting worse." "Michael," I started, keeping my voice weak. "No, listen to me," he interrupted gently. "I looked up the symptoms you have been having. confusion, lethargy, headaches. It matches the early stages of cognitive decline. If something happens and you cannot make decisions for yourself, the state could freeze your assets. Titan Fortress Solutions. The accounts, the house. Everything could be tied up in probate for years. "He is right, Robert," Veronica chimed in, her voice like syrup. "We just want to protect you. If you sign the durable power of attorney now, Michael can handle the heavy lifting. You can just relax. You have worked hard for 40 years. Let us take the burden." The audacity of it was breathtaking. They were poisoning me to simulate a decline, and then using the symptoms of that poisoning as the justification to steal my life while I was still breathing. It was elegant. It was evil. And it was exactly the kind of plan an engineer would come up with. A closed loop. I need to think," I stammered, putting the tea down. "My head is spinning. I cannot read legal documents right now." Michael exchanged a quick glance with Veronica. A flash of irritation crossed his face, gone in a microsecond. "Of course, Dad. No rush. Why don't you go lie down, take a nap? We can talk about it at dinner." "Yes," I said, standing up slowly, leaning on the armrest for support. "A nap sounds good." "I will come check on you in an hour," Michael said. "No," I said, perhaps too quickly. I coughed to cover it. "No, let me sleep. If I am sleeping, the pain goes away. Just wake me for dinner." I walked out of the room, feeling their eyes on my back. I climbed the stairs, each step a heavy thud in the silent house. When I reached the top of the landing, I paused. My bedroom was at the end of the hall, the master suite. It was supposed to be my sanctuary. Now I knew it was a gas chamber. I entered the room and closed the door. I did not lock it. That would be suspicious. Michael had keys to every door in this house anyway. I moved to the bed and messed up the pillows and the duvet, making it look like I was lying down. Then I moved to the far corner of the room, near the heavy oak wardrobe, where I kept my personal safe. But I did not open the safe. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a device I had retrieved from my workshop in the garage before coming inside. It was not a weapon, not in the traditional sense. It was a portable single-gas monitor, a Honeywell BW Solo, calibrated specifically for carbon monoxide. I had used it for years when inspecting industrial vaults located in basements, where ventilation was poor. I switched it on. The device beeped softly. I muted it instantly. The small LCD screen flickered to life. I held it at waist height. 0 parts per million. I frowned. I moved closer to the bed. 2 parts per million. Still negligible. Safe levels. But Michael had said he adjusted the intake valve. He said it was a closed loop for the bedroom. I looked up at the ceiling vent. The air conditioning was humming softly, pushing cool air into the room. I dragged a chair over to the vent, climbed up, and held the device directly against the airflow. The numbers on the screen began to climb. 10, 20, 40, 65. My heart hammered against my ribs. 65 parts per million. At this level, it would not kill you instantly. It would not even trigger a standard household carbon monoxide detector, which usually only alarms at high concentrations, over a short period to prevent false positives. But 65 parts per million breathed in over 8 hours of sleep night after night. It causes headaches, nausea, fatigue, mental confusion, and over time it strains the heart. For a man of 64 with a history of hypertension, it would eventually trigger a cardiac event, a heart attack in his sleep. The coroner would see an old man with a bad heart. No one would think to check the blood saturation levels for CO unless they were looking for it. The numbers on the screen continued to tick up slowly. 70. They were ramping it up. Just like he said in the recording, they were increasing the dosage. Tonight, if I slept here, I might not wake up at all. Or I might wake up with brain damage severe enough that signing that power of attorney would not just be an option. It would be a necessity. I stepped down from the chair and stared at the vent. I felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with the gas. I looked around the room. This was the room where I had held my wife's hand as she took her last breath. This was the room where Michael used to run in on Sunday mornings to jump on the bed. I sat on the edge of the mattress, the gas monitor clutched in my hand like a grenade. The betrayal was total. It wasn't just about the money. Money comes and goes. I could have forgiven him for stealing from me. I could have forgiven him for being greedy. But this was a dismantling of my existence. He wasn't just killing me. He was gaslighting me into believing I was losing my mind before he took my life. He wanted me to die, scared, confused, and thinking I was broken. I remember the day Michael graduated with his engineering degree. I was so proud. I had shaken his hand and told him, "You build the world, son. I just lock it up." He was using the very education I paid for to murder me. Tears burned my eyes hot and angry. I let them fall. I let myself feel the crushing weight of it for exactly 1 minute. I grieved the son I thought I had. I grieved the father I thought I was. I grieved the future I had imagined where I bounced my grandchildren on my knee in this house. Then I wiped my face. The minute was over. Robert Brown, the father, was dead. He had died the moment that number hit 70 on the monitor. Robert Brown, the security specialist, was now in charge. I looked at the vent again. I could block it. I could open the windows. I could go downstairs and confront them right now. I could scream and shout and wave the monitor in their faces. I could call the police and have them dragged out in handcuffs within the hour. But that was too easy. If I called the police now, what would happen? A long trial, expensive lawyers. Michael would claim it was an accident, a faulty repair. He would claim he was trying to fix the heater and made a mistake. He was an engineer. He could talk his way around a jury. Veronica would play the weeping, supportive fiancé. They might get off with a slap on the wrist or a few years in a minimum security facility. And my grandson Leo, he would grow up knowing his father was a criminal, but he would never understand the depth of the evil. Number. Police were for civilians. Police were for people who dial 911 when they hear a noise in the night. I was the man who designed the systems that made the police unnecessary. They wanted this house. They wanted the assets. They wanted to play a game of life and death. Fine. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the sprawling lawn. I saw Michael down by the pool talking on his phone, gesturing wildly. He looked confident. He looked like a king surveying his kingdom. He had no idea that the castle was about to turn against him. I would not just survive. I would not just escape. I was going to teach Michael and Veronica a lesson about security, a lesson about what happens when you try to breach a fortress that has been fortified by 40 years of rage and technical expertise. I looked at the gas monitor one last time, then slipped it back into my pocket. I checked my watch. It was 4 in the afternoon. I had approximately 24 hours before the signing dinner they were planning. 24 hours to turn this house from a home into a machine. I lay back on the pillows, closing my eyes, but keeping my mind sharp. I began to visualize the schematics of the house, the wiring, the locking mechanisms, the panic room in the library that I hadn't used in a decade. Michael thought he was putting me to sleep, but he had just woken up a monster. I waited for the sound of his footsteps on the stairs, ready to play the part of the dying old man one last time. But inside, the tumblers were clicking into place. The lockout was about to begin. The next morning, I initiated Phase 1 of what I was calling Project Fortress. The performance began at breakfast. I shuffled into the kitchen wearing my bathrobe, rubbing my temples with theatrical weariness, making sure my hands trembled just enough when I reached for the orange juice. Michael and Veronica were already there, scrolling through their phones like sharks patrolling a digital reef. "I cannot do this anymore," I said, my voice cracking perfectly. The headaches, the confusion. "I need a break." Michael looked up, a flicker of genuine hope in his eyes. "What do you mean, Dad?" "I am going to the coastal retreat in St. Augustine," I lied. "The one Dr. Evans recommended. Just for 3 days. The sea air. Maybe it will clear my head before we sign the papers. I want to be lucid when I hand everything over." Veronica exchanged a quick, triumphant glance with Michael. "That is a wonderful idea, Robert. You deserve the rest. When do you want to leave?" "Now," I said. "I will pack a bag. I just need to get away from this house for a bit." I left within the hour. Michael even carried my bag to the car, his solicitude almost touching. If I didn't know, he was likely calculating how much faster the gas would work when I returned refreshed and slept deeper. I drove north on I-95 until I was sure I wasn't being followed. Then I doubled back. I wasn't going to a spa. I was going to war. My first stop was a small diner on the outskirts of the city. Maya was waiting in a booth in the back, Leo asleep in a carrier beside her. She looked terrified when I walked in, clutching her coffee cup like a lifeline. I sat down and slid a thick envelope across the table. It contained $20,000 in cash. I had withdrawn it from an old emergency account that Michael didn't know existed. "This is for Leo," I said, cutting off her protest. "Diapers, food, a safe place to stay. Not a loan. It is his inheritance, an advance payment." She stared at the envelope, then at me. "Mr. Brown, I did not give you the key for money. I just wanted you to be safe." "I know," I said, my voice softening for the first time in 24 hours. "And because of you I am. But now I need you to do one more thing for me. I need you to stay hidden for 3 days. And then on Friday night, I need you to be ready to answer a video call. Can you do that?" She nodded slowly. Is Michael going to be okay?" I looked at her, at the bruise of fatigue under her eyes, at the fear she still carried for the man who had abandoned her. "Michael is going to face the consequences of his actions, Maya. That is all." I left her there and drove to an industrial park in the South District. This was the home of TechSec Supply, a wholesale distributor for security professionals. The owner, a grizzled veteran named Sal, had known me for 30 years. He didn't ask questions when I handed him a shopping list that would have raised flags at any retail store. "Building a new prototype, Bob?" Sal asked, hauling a heavy crate onto the counter. "Something like that," I replied. The inventory was specific. 6 pinhole cameras with 4K resolution and wireless transmission. 3 electromagnetic locks rated for 1,200 pounds of holding force each. A commercial-grade signal jammer. A biometric reader override kit. And a high-fidelity sound system designed for stadium announcements, compact but deafening. I paid in cash and loaded the gear into my trunk. By the time I drove back toward my neighborhood, it was Thursday morning. I parked my car 3 blocks away in a neighbor's driveway, who I knew was wintering in Vermont. I watched my own house through a pair of high-powered binoculars. At 8:30, Michael's sports car roared out of the driveway. At 8:45, Veronica's SUV followed. They were going to work, or shopping, or whatever it was parasites did while waiting for their host to die. I had 8 hours. I entered the house through the back service door, disabling the alarm with the master code. The silence of the house was different now. It was waiting. I went straight to the library. The library was my favorite room. Mahogany shelves, floor-to-ceiling books, and in the corner, hidden behind a false bookcase, was the panic room. I had built it 15 years ago after a kidnapping scare in the neighborhood. It was a 10 by 10 steel box, reinforced concrete walls, independent ventilation, and a solid steel door. It was designed to keep people safe inside, while the world burned outside. Today, I was going to invert its purpose. I started with the door. The existing lock was a standard heavy-duty deadbolt, accessible from the inside. I stripped it out. In its place, I installed the electromagnetic locks. I mounted them on the outside frame hidden behind the decorative molding. When activated, these magnets would bond the door to the frame with a force that would require a battering ram to break, and the control switch that would be exclusively external. Next, the glass. The panic room had a small observation window, bulletproof glass, rated to stop a .357 Magnum. I cleaned it until it was invisible. I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to see exactly who was pushing the buttons. I spent the next 3 hours wiring the audiovisuals. I drilled microscopic holes in the molding for the pinhole cameras, positioning them to cover every inch of the room. I installed the high-output speakers in the ceiling cavity, concealing them behind the ventilation grills. The sound inside that steel box would be absolute. It would bounce off the hard surfaces, amplifying every word, every accusation. Then came the pièce de résistance, the projector. I mounted a high-lumen projector outside the glass, aimed at the rear wall of the panic room. The wall was painted a matte cream, perfect for a screen. My hands moved with the muscle memory of a lifetime in the trade, stripping wire, crimping connections, testing circuits. I was in a flow state. I wasn't angry anymore. I was efficient. I was a surgeon preparing the operating theater. At 2 o'clock, I moved to the main house system. I went to the server closet in the basement. This was the brain of the smart home Michael was so proud of. He had set it up to control everything from his phone lights, temperature locks. He thought he was the admin. I jacked my laptop directly into the mainframe. I bypassed his credentials in 30 seconds. He had used a dictionary password. Sarasota 2025. Pathetic. I rewrote the admin protocols. I locked out his MAC address. I disabled the external internet connection for the security cameras, so he couldn't check the feeds remotely. I created a localized intranet that only I controlled. Then, I went to the master bedroom. I looked at the vent where the poison gas was leaking. I didn't fix it. Not yet. I simply placed a hidden sensor inside the duct to record the ppm levels in real time. I wanted data. I wanted a graph that showed the exact moment the levels spiked tonight. It would be the final nail in his coffin. By 4 o'clock, I was finished. I stood in the center of the library. The false bookcase was open, revealing the steel door of the panic room. To the untrained eye, nothing had changed. But to me, the room hummed with latent energy. The magnets were dormant, but ready. The cameras were live. The trap was set. I cleaned up every scrap of wire, every dust mote from the drilling. I wiped down surfaces. I checked my work twice. A good locksmith never leaves a trace. I packed my tools and slipped out the back door just as the sun began to dip lower. I retrieved my car and drove to a motel on the highway, checking in under a fake name. That night, lying on the lumpy motel mattress, I opened my laptop. I pulled up the feed from the hidden cameras in my house. I watched Michael and Veronica come home. I watched them pour wine. I watched them toast to their future. "One more day," Michael said, his voice tinny through my laptop speakers. "He comes back tomorrow. We get him to sign the papers at dinner. Then, we let nature take its course." "Do you think he suspects anything?" Veronica asked, kicking off her heels. "Dad," Michael laughed. "He is checking into a spa because he thinks he is losing his marbles. He is soft V. He spent his life building locks, but he never realized the real danger was already inside." I watched them laugh. I watched them celebrate my impending death. I reached out and touched the screen, tracing the outline of my son's face. "You are right, Michael," I whispered. "I am checking out. But tomorrow you are checking in. And trust me, Titan Fortress has a strict no-checkout policy." I closed the laptop and slept. The preparation was complete. Project Fortress was live. Tomorrow the steel door would slam shut, and the real education would begin. I returned to the house on Friday afternoon, timing my arrival perfectly with the golden hour. The late afternoon sun bathed the white stucco walls in a warm, deceptive glow, making the fortress look like a palace. I parked my vintage sedan next to Michael's black sports car, the juxtaposition of old reliability and new arrogance stark against the paved driveway. When I walked through the front door, the smell of roasted garlic and rosemary hit me. Veronica was cooking. This was unprecedented. Veronica's idea of dinner usually involved a reservation or a delivery app. The fact that she was actually using the stove meant they were pulling out all the stops. This was the Last Supper, and I was the guest of honor. "Dad!" Michael came striding out of the living room, arms wide. He looked sharp in a navy blazer and crisp white shirt, the uniform of the successful heir he desperately wanted to be. "Welcome back, you look rested." I dropped my bag on the floor and gave him a weary smile, letting my shoulders slump just enough to sell the performance. "I feel better, Michael. The sea air, it helps. But the fog is still there. It comes and goes." "Well, you are home now," he said, clapping a hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy, like a shackle. "We are going to take care of everything. Veronica made her famous lamb roast. We wanted to celebrate." "Celebrate?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Your retirement," he said smoothly. "The next chapter. A life without stress." "Ah, yes," I nodded. "A life without stress. That sounds permanent." We moved to the dining room. They had set the table with the good china the Lenox set my late wife, Sarah, had bought for our 25th anniversary. Seeing Veronica place a serving platter on those plates made my stomach tighten, but I kept my face neutral. The dinner was a masterclass in subtext. We ate. We drank expensive wine, a bottle of Cabernet that I had been saving for a special occasion, which Michael had presumptuously opened, and we talked. Or rather, they talked, and I listened to the lies dripping from their lips like honeyed poison. "So the papers are all ready?" I asked, cutting a piece of lamb. It was overcooked, dry as dust. "Everything is drafted," Michael said, wiping his mouth with a linen napkin. "Just like we discussed. It transfers the Titan Fortress shares and the property deed into a trust. I am the trustee, but it is all for your benefit, of course. It just means I can manage the day-to-day without bothering you." "And the medical proxy?" I asked, looking at Veronica. "It is standard," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "It just lets us make decisions if, well, in case you have one of your episodes and cannot communicate." "Right," I said. "Episodes." I put my fork down and looked at my son. The candlelight flickered in his eyes, masking the emptiness behind them. "You know, Michael sitting here reminds me of that time you were 7. Do you remember you broke Mrs. Gable's window with a baseball?" Michael blinked, caught off guard by the shift in topic. Yeah, vaguely." "You came home and hid under your bed," I continued, my voice soft. "You were terrified. But I told you to come out. I told you that a man owns his mistakes. I took you to her house and you apologized. You paid for that window with your allowance for 3 months." "I remember," Michael said, shifting in his seat. He took a long sip of wine. "Why bring that up now?" "Because I was proud of you that day," I said. "You were scared, but you told the truth. You stood in front of the consequences and you did not blink. It is a rare quality, integrity. It is the only security system that never fails. You can pick a lock, you can hack a password, but you cannot fake integrity." The room went silent. The air conditioner hummed in the background, a low drone that I knew was pumping poisoned air into my bedroom upstairs. Michael cleared his throat, a nervous, jagged sound. "Yeah, well, those were different times, Dad. The world is more complicated now." "Is it?" I asked. "Or do we just make it complicated to justify the things we do?" Veronica laughed, a brittle sound that shattered the tension. "You are getting philosophical, Robert. It must be the wine. Let's not get bogged down in the past. We should focus on the future, your future." "You are right," I said, pushing my plate away. "The future. Let's get to it. The papers." "They are in the study," Michael said, eager to move on. "Actually," I said, standing up, "I have the original deeds and the stock certificates in the main safe. In the library. We should do this properly. Sign everything in the presence of the assets, so to speak." Michael's eyes lit up. The main safe. He had been trying to get the combination for that safety for years. He knew that was where I kept the bearer bonds and the gold reserves. "That sounds perfect," he said, standing up too quickly. "Lead the way," Veronica said. We walked down the hallway. The house felt heavy around us, the shadows stretching long and distorted on the walls. I led them to the library. I opened the double mahogany doors and stepped inside. The room was dim, lit only by the street lamps filtering through the sheer curtains. The smell of old paper and lemon polish was comforting. "I keep the safe in the back," I said, pointing toward the far wall. I walked over to the false bookcase and pulled the hidden lever. The mechanism clicked, silent, smooth, well-oiled. The bookcase swung open, revealing the steel door of the panic room. Michael and Veronica stared. They knew about the room, of course, but they had never been inside. I rarely opened it. "I did not know you still use this," Michael said, stepping closer. "It is the safest place in the house," I said. "Fireproof, soundproof, completely isolated. I moved the safe in here last year. Better security." I punched a code into the keypad. The heavy electromagnetic locks I had secretly installed were currently disengaged. The door swung open with a heavy, reassuring thud. Inside, the room was stark. Just a metal table, 2 chairs, and the large floor safe in the corner. The walls were lined with acoustic foam covered in gray fabric. It looked like a recording booth or a cell, depending on your perspective. "After you," I said, gesturing for them to enter. Michael walked in first, his eyes glued to the safe. Greed is a powerful blinder. He did not look at the ceiling where the new speakers were hidden. He did not look at the molding where the pinhole cameras were blinking. He only saw the metal box that held his fortune. Veronica followed him, her heels clicking on the concrete floor. "It is cozy," she murmured, looking around with a hint of disdain. "A bit claustrophobic." "It is designed for safety, not comfort," I said, standing at the threshold. "So, do you have the combination?" Michael asked, turning to face me. He was standing right in the center of the room, exactly where I wanted him. "I do," I said. I patted my jacket pocket. "And I have the pen to sign the papers." "Great," Michael smiled. It was a predator's smile, full of teeth and triumph. "Let's get this done, Dad. Then you can finally rest." "Yes," I said, my hand closing around the object in my pocket. "Rest." I stepped into the room, just for a second, to place a folder on the metal table. "The transfer documents are here. But before we sign, there is one small thing." "What is it?" Veronica asked, impatient. I looked at them. My son, my almost daughter-in-law. They looked so confident, so sure that the old man was just a senile obstacle to be removed. They had no idea that they had just walked into the belly of the beast. "I just wanted to say," I began, my voice steady and cold, "that I really did enjoy that story about baseball, Michael. It is a shame you forgot the lesson." Michael frowned. "What?" I smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Was the lesson, Michael. You own your mistakes." And with that, I stepped back. The air in the panic room felt instantly colder, though the temperature had not changed. Michael and Veronica stood by the metal table, the manila folder I had placed there, sitting between us like a loaded gun. They were waiting for me to pull out a pen to sign away my life's work, to validate their treachery with a stroke of ink. "The pen, Dad?" Michael asked, tapping his fingers on the table. "You said you had it. Let's get this over with. The champagne is getting warm." "Right," I said, my hand still deep in my jacket pocket. "The pen. But first, there is a small addendum to the contract, a clause about liabilities." "Liabilities?" Veronica frowned, her eyes narrowing. "We went over this with the lawyers. Trust shields you from everything." "Not everything," I replied softly. I withdrew my hand. But instead of a Mont Blanc fountain pen, I was holding a small, jagged piece of metal. The Abloy Protect 2 key. The silver finish caught the harsh overhead light of the panic room, gleaming like a surgical instrument. I tossed it onto the metal table. It landed with a sharp, resonant clink that seemed to echo in the confined space. It spun for a second, a blur of motion, before coming to rest, pointing directly at Michael's chest. "Before anyone signs anything," I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "Tell me, Michael, do you recognize this?" Michael looked down. At first, his expression was one of annoyance, the look of a busy man interrupted by a triviality. Then his eyes focused on the key. He saw the distinct cut of the blade. He saw the number stamped on the head, 305. And he saw the logo of Ironclad Storage. The reaction was visceral. It started in his eyes, a sudden widening, a flash of pure, unadulterated panic. Then it spread to his face. The color drained from his skin so fast, it was like watching a bucket of white paint being poured over him. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. His confident posture collapsed, his shoulders hunched, as if he had been physically struck. He knew. He knew exactly what that key opened. He knew it opened the box where he kept the blueprints for the gas line modifications. He knew it held the backup vials of sedatives he planned to use if the gas was too slow. And he knew, with terrifying clarity, that if I had the key, I had seen what was inside. "Michael," Veronica asked, her voice trembling. She looked from the key to him, sensing the shift in the room, but not understanding the source. "What is that? What is wrong?" Michael looked up at me. The arrogance was gone. In its place was the raw terror of a child caught standing over a broken vase. Only this vase was a murder plot. "Dad," he whispered, his voice cracking. Where did you get that?" "From a ghost," I said. "From the family you threw away." "I can explain," he stammered, taking a step toward me, his hands raising in a pathetic gesture of surrender. "It is not what you think. That key, it is just for old files, business stuff." "Do not insult me," I snapped. "I saw the blueprints, Michael. I heard the recordings. Closed loop, intake valve, 50 parts per million." At the mention of the gas levels, Veronica gasped. She covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes darting to the door. She realized the game was up. "Robert, wait!" she cried out. "He made me do it. I did not want to." "Shut up!" Michael roared at her, his face twisting into a snarl. He lunged toward the table, grabbing for the key, perhaps thinking he could destroy the evidence, or maybe just acting on pure, desperate instinct. That was my cue. I did not flinch. I did not run. I moved with the precise, practiced speed of a man who had spent 40 years working with mechanisms that required split-second timing. I took one large step backward, clearing the threshold of the panic room. My hand found the hidden control panel I had installed on the outer frame of the door jamb. Michael saw me move. He realized his mistake. He abandoned the key and sprinted toward the door. "Dad, no." He was fast, but electricity is faster. My thumb slammed down on the red activation button. Clang thud. The heavy steel door swung shut with the force of a guillotine. It slammed into the frame just inches from Michael's outstretched fingers. Immediately, the electromagnetic locks engaged. Wham! 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 3 massive magnets each, capable of holding 1,200 pounds, bonded the door to the frame. The sound was like a gunshot, a final definitive seal. I stood there for a second, breathing hard, my fingers still pressing the button, as if to physically hold them in. But I didn't need to. Physics was doing the work now. That door was now a solid wall. A tank could hit it, and it wouldn't budge. On the other side of the bulletproof glass observation window, Michael slammed into the door. He pounded on the steel with his fists, his mouth opening in a silent scream. Veronica was behind him, sliding down the wall in hysterics. I stepped back and smoothed my jacket. I walked over to the external console I had set up on a rolling cart in the library. I flipped a switch, activating the two-way intercom system. "Save your energy, Michael," I said into the microphone. My voice boomed inside the panic room, amplified by the high-output speakers I had hidden in their ceiling. "That is reinforced steel held by 3,600 pounds of magnetic force. You are not getting out." Michael, pressed his face against the glass. His eyes were wild bloodshot. "Open the door. Are you crazy? Open the goddamn door." "Crazy?" I asked, looking at him through the glass. "Crazy is poisoning your own father for an insurance payout. Crazy is adjusting a furnace valve to turn a bedroom into a gas chamber. This is just containment." "I will call the police," he screamed, pulling his phone from his pocket. "I am calling 911 right now. You are kidnapping us." I watched him tap the screen frantically. Then, I watched the realization hit him. He held the phone up, staring at the signal bars. Or rather, the lack of them. "No signal," I said calmly. "Faraday cage. Copper mesh lining in the walls. I installed it years ago to protect against electronic eavesdropping. You know that, Michael. You bragged about it to your friends. The safest room in the state." Michael threw his phone against the wall. It shattered. He turned back to the glass, his face contorted with rage. "You old fool! You cannot keep us here forever. People will come looking. My business partners. Veronica's friends." "Maybe," I shrugged. "But they will not find you. Not here. You see, I modified the ventilation system for that room today. It is on a separate loop now." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. Michael went still. He looked up at the vent in the panic room ceiling. The same vent he had ignored when he walked in. "What did you do?" he whispered. The microphone picked it up perfectly. "Nothing lethal," I said. "I am not you, son. I do not kill family. But I do control the airflow. And right now, you have enough oxygen for about, let's say, 6 hours comfortably. 12 if you stop screaming and conserve your breath." "You are bluffing," Veronica sobbed, crawling toward the glass. "He is bluffing, Michael. He wouldn't hurt us." "Am I?" I reached for the tablet on my console. "Let's review the evidence, shall we?" "You like presentations, Michael. You are always making pitch decks." I tapped the screen. The projector I had mounted outside the room roared to life. A beam of light cut through the dim library and hit the back wall of the panic room, turning it into a 10-foot movie screen. The image that appeared was a blueprint. But not just any blueprint. It was the schematic for my home's HVAC system, with handwritten notes in red ink in the margins. Michael's handwriting. "Bypass safety valve here. Increase flow to master suite. Estimated ppm 200. Michael stared at the projection on the wall behind him. He spun around, looking at his own handwriting, his own murder plot blown up to the size of a billboard. "How?" he breathed. "Box 305, I answered. "You kept good records, Michael. An engineer to the end. You documented your crime because you were so proud of it. You thought you were smarter than everyone else." I swiped the tablet. The image changed. This time, it was a photo. A grainy surveillance shot of Michael, meeting a man in a parking lot, handing over a thick envelope of cash. "And here is you paying off the inspector to look the other way on the repairs," I narrated. "I found this on the USB drive too. You were thorough." Michael turned back to the window. He wasn't screaming anymore. He was pleading. "Dad, please, it was a mistake. We were in debt. The business is failing. I owe money to bad people. I didn't want to hurt you, I swear. I just needed the insurance money to pay them off. I was going to stop the gas before it killed you, I swear." "Liar," I said, my voice cold as ice. "I heard the audio, Michael. He is a dinosaur. We just have to wait for him to go to sleep one last time. That does not sound like you were planning to stop." "I was drunk, I didn't mean it." He slammed his fist against the glass again. "Dad, open the door. We can talk about this. I will sign whatever you want. I will leave town. Just let us out." "You are not going anywhere," I said. "Not until you understand exactly what you did." I leaned closer to the glass, until my nose was almost touching it. "You tried to take my life, my breath. You wanted to make me fade away in my sleep so you could buy a beach house. Well, now you get to experience what it feels like to be trapped. To watch your future shrink down to the size of a room. To wonder if the next breath is going to be your last. I turned away from the window and walked over to the main light switch for the library. "Let's set the mood," I said. I killed the lights in the library. The only illumination now came from the projector beam, hitting the back wall of the panic room, casting Michael and Veronica in a harsh, ghostly light. Then I pressed a button on my console. Inside the panic room, a red strobe light began to flash. It was a slow, rhythmic pulse. Flash, darkness, flash, darkness. It was disorienting, designed to induce anxiety and break down mental defenses. "Welcome to Titan Fortress, Michael," I whispered into the mic. "Class is in session." I sat down in the leather armchair outside the glass, watching them like specimens in a jar. Michael was pacing now, pulling at his hair. Veronica was curled in a fetal position in the corner. They were trapped. The trap was perfect. And the key. The key was in my pocket right next to the gas monitor that had saved my life. I checked my watch. The police would be here in exactly 45 minutes. I had called my old friend Captain Miller right before dinner. I told him I had a hostage situation, but that the perpetrators were contained. I didn't tell him who they were. I wanted him to see for himself. But for the next 45 minutes, Michael and Veronica belonged to me. And I had a lot more slides to show them. The soundproofing I had installed in the panic room was frankly a masterpiece of engineering. From where I sat in the leather armchair on the library side of the glass, I could see the chaos, but I could not hear it. I watched my son Michael slamming his fists against the reinforced door until his knuckles were likely raw. I watched Veronica screaming, her mouth, gaping wide veins bulging in her neck, her face a mask of primal terror. It was like watching a silent film of a shipwreck. It was violent, desperate, and completely detached from the quiet, lemon-scented air of the library where I sat. I let them panic for 3 full minutes. I checked my watch, counting the seconds. In security protocols, the first 3 minutes of confinement are when the subject is most irrational, most dangerous to themselves. I needed them to exhaust that initial burst of adrenaline. I needed them broken before I could rebuild them with the truth. When Michael finally stopped pounding on the door and turned to kick the steel wall in a futile tantrum, I decided it was time to join the conversation. I leaned forward and pressed the talk button on the console. "Can you hear me now?" I asked. My voice boomed inside the steel box, amplified by the high-fidelity speakers hidden in the ceiling. I saw them both jump. They spun around looking for the source of the sound, before their eyes locked onto me through the observation window. "Dad, open the door!" Michael yelled, rushing the glass. "This isn't funny. You are having a breakdown. Let us out." I adjusted the volume on my end, keeping my tone conversational, which I knew would infuriate them more than screaming. "Welcome to Titan Fortress, Michael," I said. "You spent years telling me how much you wanted this house. You wanted the deed. You wanted the legacy. Well, congratulations. You are now a permanent part of the infrastructure." "Robert, please," Veronica sobbed, pressing her hands against the glass. Her makeup was running black streaks of mascara, turning her face into a tragic clown mask. "I have claustrophobia. I cannot breathe in here. Please, I am sorry. Whatever you think we did, I am sorry." "Think," I repeated. "I do not deal in thoughts, Veronica. I deal in hard data, evidence, facts. In my line of work, we call it the audit trail." I turned to the control panel and swiped my finger across the tablet screen. "Let's look at the audit trail, shall we?" The projector mounted above my head whirred. The beam of light that had been displaying the gas schematics flickered and changed. Now, projected onto the back wall of the panic room, a 10-foot-tall canvas of their guilt, was a series of screenshots. They were text messages. Specifically, a conversation dated from 3 months ago. The text on the wall was crisp and clear. "Michael, the old man is taking forever to kick the bucket. I need that payout, V. The loan sharks are getting impatient. Veronica. Just be patient. The stress will get him." Or maybe we help the stress along, Michael. I am working on it. I found a way to tweak the furnace, make him sleepy, permanently. I watched Michael turn and look at the wall. He read his own words magnified to the size of billboards. He froze. It is one thing to type murder into a phone screen. It is another to see it projected in high definition while you are trapped in a cage. You said it was stress, I narrated, my voice cold. You told me to drink herbal tea. You held my hand and told me I was losing my mind. But here you are 3 months ago planning my execution, because you owe money to sharks. I swiped the screen again. A new image appeared. This one was a technical diagram, a hand-drawn sketch of the HVAC unit, with arrows pointing to the safety bypass valve. And this, I continued. This is your masterpiece, Michael, the engineer at work. You drew this on a napkin, didn't you? Then you scanned it. Reduce oxygen mix. Increase CO saturation. You treated your father's lungs like a carburetor you were tuning for a race. No, Michael whispered. I could hear him through the room's internal microphone. That is out of context. Context. I laughed, a harsh barking sound. The context is that you are a murderer, Michael. You just haven't succeeded yet, Veronica suddenly screamed. It was a high, piercing shriek that cut through the tension. She turned on Michael, her hands flying at his chest. I told you, she screamed, clawing at his blazer. I told you to delete everything, you idiot! You arrogant idiot! You said he was stupid. You said he was a dinosaur who couldn't turn on a computer. Get off me! Michael shoved her back. She stumbled and hit the metal table, sliding down to the floor, weeping hysterically. He dragged me into this, Veronica yelled at the glass, pointing a shaking finger at Michael. Robert, listen to me. It was all him. He owes $200,000 to a gambling ring in Miami. He said if we didn't get your life insurance, they would kill him. I just wanted to help him. I didn't want you to die. You didn't want me to die? I asked, swiping the screen again. A new text message appeared. Veronica, make sure you double the dose tonight. I want this over with before the wedding. I do not want to push a wheelchair down the aisle. The silence that followed was absolute. Veronica stared at the wall, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The lie died in her throat. You were saying, Veronica? I asked. Something about not wanting me to die, it seems. You were more concerned about the aesthetics of your wedding photos. Michael let out a roar of frustration. He grabbed the heavy metal chair from the table, one of the two I had placed there, and swung it with all his might at the observation window. Wham! The impact was tremendous. The chair was steel, Michael was strong. But the glass. The glass was a custom laminate of polycarbonate and tempered silica designed to stop a high-velocity rifle round. The chair bounced off the window with a dull thud, vibrating in Michael's hands. The glass did not even scratch. He swung again. Wham! And again. Wham! I did not flinch. I did not move. I sat there sipping a glass of water, watching him exhaust himself. It was a pathetic display of brute force against superior engineering. It was the tantrum of a child who realizes the timeout corner is made of diamond. You can hit that glass all day, Michael, I said calmly. It is rated for ballistic impact. All you are doing is using up your oxygen. Michael dropped the chair. It clattered loudly on the concrete floor. He was panting, sweat dripping down his forehead. He walked up to the glass, pressing his palms against it, leaving greasy smears on the pristine surface. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not the fear of getting caught, but the fear of a man who realizes he has lost control of his universe. Dad, he wheezed. Okay, you win. You proved your point. We are terrible people. We did bad things. But this is torture. It is freezing here. Please, just let us out. I will turn myself in. I promise. Is it freezing? I checked the readout on my console. That is interesting, because according to my sensors, it is 68 degrees there. Perfectly comfortable. I paused, tapping my chin. But you know you are right. It should match the atmosphere of your hearts. Cold. I reached for the climate control slider on my tablet. The panic room had its own dedicated HVAC unit, a high-velocity industrial chiller designed to keep server racks cool in an emergency. I slid the bar down. "Let's try 50 degrees," I said. Inside the room, the vents hissed. A blast of frigid air began to descend from the ceiling. It wasn't instant, but in a small steel box the temperature drops fast. "And while we are at it," I added, "let's adjust the lighting. I think the current ambiance is too hopeful." I pressed the alarm mode. The overhead white lights cut out instantly. The room plunged into darkness for a heartbeat. Then the red emergency strobes kicked in. Flash. Darkness. Flash. Darkness. The red light bathed them in a crimson horror show. It turned their skin gray and their eyes into black hollows. It was disorienting. It messed with your depth perception. It made the walls feel like they were closing in. "Stop it!" Veronica shrieked, covering her ears as if the light made noise. "Stop the lights. I am going to be sick." "Sick?" I asked. "Like I was sick, Michael. Like the headaches I had every morning for 6 weeks. Like the nausea I felt while you poured me tea and asked if I had signed the will." I leaned into the microphone, my voice hard as granite. "I am not torturing you," I said. "I am not touching you. I am not poisoning you. I am simply creating an environment where you cannot look away. There are no phones in there, Michael. No distractions. No lies to hide behind. Just you, the woman you conspired with, and the truth on the wall." I swiped the tablet one more time. The text messages disappeared. In their place, a video file began to play. It was the recording from the pinhole camera I had installed in the living room 3 days ago. On the screen, giant-sized Michael and Veronica were sitting on my couch, drinking my wine. Video Michael. "He is a dinosaur. We just have to wait for him to go to sleep one last time." I watched the real Michael watch the video Michael. He slumped against the wall, sliding down until he hit the floor. He pulled his knees to his chest, burying his face in his hands. The red light pulsed over him, a broken man in a blinking hell. "You called me a dinosaur," I said to the slumped figure. "You were right. I am old. I am from a different time. A time when you looked a man in the eye before you tried to kill him. But you forgot one thing about dinosaurs, son." I waited until he looked up. "We have thick skin," I said, "and we survived a lot worse than a greedy little lizard like you." The temperature in the room was dropping. I could see their breath misting in the red light. Veronica was shivering, hugging herself, her teeth chattering audibly. "You have about 20 minutes before the police arrive," I told them. "I suggest you use this time to get your story straight. Although considering I have sent all these files to Detective Miller's personal email already, I doubt it will matter." You called the police?" Michael asked, his voice shaking from the cold. "Oh yes," I said. "I am a law-abiding citizen, Michael. I caught 2 intruders in my home. 2 dangerous criminals who attempted to murder the homeowner. I simply detained them for their own safety." I sat back in the chair, watching the red light pulse. Flash. Darkness. Flash. Darkness. "Think about it this way," I said, my voice softening just a fraction. "I am giving you the one thing you tried to take from me." "What?" Michael whispered. "Time," I said. "Time to think, time to reflect, time to realize that the only reason you are still breathing is because I am a better man than you will ever be." I cut the microphone feed. I didn't want to hear their excuses anymore. I just wanted to watch. I wanted to etch this image into my memory forever. The 2 people who tried to steal my life, shivering in a cold steel box bathed in the red light of their own destruction. It was not revenge. It was justice. And it was beautiful. The red strobe light continued its rhythmic pulse, dissecting the panic room into slices of crimson terror. Flash. Darkness. Flash. Michael was huddled in the corner, his expensive blazer pulled tight around him against the creeping chill. Veronica was sobbing quietly, a broken heap on the floor. They were defeated, stripped of their arrogance, but I wasn't finished. I had dismantled their plot, yes. I had exposed their greed, but I hadn't yet touched the core of their moral rot. I hadn't yet shown them the face of the victims they didn't even know they had created. I reached for the tablet on the console. My hand hovered over the screen. This next part wasn't about data or blueprints. It was about blood. "Turn off the strobe," Michael croaked, his voice muffled through the glass. "Please, my head is splitting." "Headache?" I asked, my voice flat. "Imagine that. Now imagine having that headache for 6 weeks while someone tells you it is just your imagination. But fine. I will stabilize the lights. I want you to see this clearly." I switched the lighting mode from alarm to presentation. The strobes ceased. The overhead lights returned to a dim, steady white. Michael blinked, shielding his eyes from the sudden brightness. He looked up at me, his face pale and drawn, hoping for mercy. "Thank you," he whispered. "Don't thank me," I said. "Look at the wall." I swiped the screen. The video of their living room confession vanished. In its place, a high-resolution photograph appeared. It was a picture I had taken 3 days ago from the window of my car outside the diner. It showed a young woman in a gray hoodie pushing a stroller. Her face was thin, etched with exhaustion, but her eyes were fierce, protective. Inside the stroller, a baby boy with tufts of dark hair was reaching for a bottle. Michael stared at the image. At first, there was no recognition, just confusion. Why was his father showing him a random woman? Then he looked closer. He saw the curve of her jaw, the scar on her chin. "Maya," he breathed. The name escaped his lips like a ghost he thought he had exorcised. "You remember her," I said. It wasn't a question. "You should. You spent 6 months with her. You promised her the world. And then when she told you she was pregnant, you offered her $5,000 to make the problem go away." Michael scrambled to his feet, pressing his face against the glass. "How? How did you find her? She left town. She disappeared." "She didn't disappear, Michael," I said, my voice rising with a sudden surge of fury. "She hid. She hid from you. Because you threatened her. You told her you had dangerous friends. You told her you would ruin her life if she didn't abort that child." I swiped the screen again. A new photo appeared. A close-up of the baby. Leo. He had Michael's eyes. He had the same chin Michael had at that age. The resemblance was undeniable. It was biological proof staring back at him from 10 feet high. "Meet Leo," I said. "Your son. My grandson." Michael stared at the baby. His knees buckled and he leaned against the glass for support. I have a son." "You have a victim," I corrected him. "You don't get to call him son. A father protects. A father provides. You tried to erase him because he was inconvenient for your lifestyle. You were so busy chasing my money, chasing this house, chasing Veronica's approval, that you threw away your own flesh and blood like garbage." Veronica looked up from the floor, her eyes wide. "You have a kid. You told me she got rid of it." "I thought she did," Michael yelled back at her, desperation in his voice. "She took the money. She said she would do it." "She took the money to survive," I roared, slamming my hand on the console. The sound boomed through the speakers, making them both flinch. "She took the money to buy diapers, to buy food, to keep that boy alive while living in a rusted-out sedan, because she was too terrified to ask for help." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. The anger was shaking my hands. I needed to be steady. "Do you want to know how I met her?" I asked, lowering my voice to a whisper that was louder than any shout. "Do you want to know how I got the key?" Michael didn't answer. He couldn't. He was staring at the photo of Leo, tears streaming down his face. Maybe it was regret. Maybe it was just self-pity. I didn't care. "I met her at the grocery store," I said. "Check out lane 4. She was buying baby formula. The hypoallergenic kind. The expensive kind. Do you remember that brand, Michael? We bought it for you when you were colicky." Michael nodded dumbly. "Her card was declined," I continued. "She was standing there humiliating herself, begging the cashier to try again. She didn't have $40 to feed your son. $40, Michael. You spent $500 on that wine we drank at dinner. You wear shoes that cost more than her car." I paused, letting the shame sink in. "I paid for it," I said. "I didn't know who she was. I just saw a mother in trouble. I paid for the formula because it was the right thing to do. That is it. A simple act of kindness for a stranger." I looked at Michael, locking eyes with him through the bulletproof glass. And that act saved my life. Michael looked confused. "What?" "She recognized me," I said. "She knew my name because she had stalked you online. She knew who I was. And when I helped her, when I showed her a shred of decency that you never did, she decided to save me. She gave me the key, Michael. She told me to check my mailbox. She handed me the weapon to destroy you because she couldn't stand to see another person hurt by your greed." I laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "Irony is a funny thing, isn't it? You plotted for months. You built a gas chamber. You forged documents. You thought you had accounted for every variable. But you forgot the human variable. You forgot that goodness exists. You forgot that when you treat people like trash, eventually the trash fights back." Michael slid down the glass until he was sitting on the floor again. He put his head in his hands and began to sob. Ugly, heaving sobs that racked his body. "I am sorry," he wailed. "Dad, I am so sorry. I messed up." I messed up everything." "You didn't just mess up," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "You broke something that can never be fixed. I used to look at you and see my legacy. I looked at you and saw the future. Now I look at you and I see a void. A hollow man who would kill his own father for a payout and starve his own son for convenience." I stood up from the chair and walked to the glass. I placed my hand against it, right where his head was resting on the other side. "I used to think my greatest asset was this house," I said quietly. "Or the company. Or the stocks. I spent 40 years securing them, protecting them. But I was wrong." I looked at the photo of Leo on the wall. "My greatest asset is my self-respect," I said. "It is the ability to look in the mirror and know that I never sold my soul. It is the ability to help a stranger without asking for anything in return. That is true wealth, Michael. And you are destitute. You have nothing, no money, no honor. No family." Veronica crawled over to him, gripping his arm. "Robert, please. We will go away. We will disappear. You never have to see us again. Just don't call the police. Think about the scandal. Think about your reputation." "My reputation?" I asked, looking at her with pity. "My reputation is built on keeping bad people out. Tonight I am just doing my job. I am securing the perimeter." I looked at my watch. "The police are 5 minutes away," I announced. "I can see their lights on the perimeter cameras. Detective Miller is leading them. He is a good man. He has grandchildren. He is going to love hearing about the baby formula." Michael looked up, panic flaring again. "Dad, no prison. I can't go to prison. I will die there." "You won't die," I said. "You will live. You will live in a 6x8 cell. It will be a lot like this room, actually. Just without the expensive projection system. You will have a lot of time to think about Leo. You will have time to think about the gas valve. And you will have time to realize that you put yourself there." I turned off the projector. The image of Leo vanished, plunging the room back into the stark white light of reality. "I am not going to kill you, Michael," I said, answering the question he was too afraid to ask. "I am not you. I don't use poison. I don't use traps to murder. I use traps to catch. I walked back to the console and packed up my tablet. I am letting the law handle you, I said. Because that is what civilized men do. We don't play God. We trust the system. And the system is coming for you, son. It is coming with handcuffs and a long, long sentence. I heard sirens in the distance now. Real sirens wailing in the night air, getting louder by the second. They are here, I said. I looked at Michael and Veronica one last time. They looked small, pathetic. Two rats caught in a maze they thought they had designed. Goodbye, Michael, I said. I hope the money was worth it. I turned my back on the glass and walked toward the library doors to greet the officers. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew exactly where they were. They were right where they belonged, safely locked away. The wail of sirens cut through the quiet night of our gated community, growing louder and more insistent with every passing second. Blue and red lights began to flash through the library windows, painting the mahogany shelves in chaotic dancing colors. It was a spectacle, exactly as I had intended. I walked to the front door, straightened my tie in the hallway mirror, and opened it just as Captain Miller's squad car screeched to a halt at the bottom of the driveway. Captain John Miller was a man built like a fire hydrant, solid and unmovable. We had known each other for 30 years, ever since I installed the security system for his precinct back in the 90s. He stepped out of the car, his hand resting instinctively on his holster, followed by 4 uniformed officers and a tactical team that looked ready to storm a cartel compound. Robert Miller said, his voice gruff but concerned as he walked up the steps. You okay? You said on the phone it was contained, but this is a lot of hardware for a domestic. I am fine, John, I said, shaking his hand. My grip was steady. And it is not just a domestic. It is an attempted homicide. I just happened to catch the perps before they could finish the job. And the evidence? Miller asked, looking past me into the house. You got the email? I asked. Yeah, I got it, Miller grimaced. The audio files, the blueprints, the texts. My tech guys are already verifying the metadata. If this is real, Robert, God, I am sorry. It is sick. It is real, I said. And the confession is live. I have been streaming the audio from the containment room to your dispatch for the last 20 minutes. You heard everything, Miller nodded grimly. We heard it. The gas valve, the insurance, the baby. Every word. It is a slam dunk, Robert. We don't even need to interview them. We just need to book them. Good, I said. They are in the library. Follow me. I led the officers through the hallway. The house felt different now. It was no longer a tomb. It was a crime scene, sterile and official. We entered the library, where the only light came from the red standby LED on the panic room door and the flashing strobes from the police cruisers outside. Inside the panic room, Michael and Veronica were huddled together on the floor. They looked up when they saw the uniforms. For a second, relief washed over Michael's face, the delusion that the police were here to rescue him from his crazy father. Then he saw Miller's expression. He saw the cold, hard look of a cop who knows exactly what kind of scum he is looking at. Open it up, Miller said to me. I walked to the console. I looked at Michael through the glass one last time. He mouthed the word Dad, but I didn't respond. I pressed the release sequence. Thud clack. The massive electromagnetic locks disengaged. The sound was heavy final. The door hissed as the seal broke, swinging open slowly. Michael Brown, Veronica Hayes, Miller shouted, his voice booming. Step out of the room with your hands where I can see them. Do it now, Michael stumbled out first. He was a mess. His expensive blazer was wrinkled, his hair wild, his face streaked with tears and snot. He looked nothing like the arrogant heir who had sipped wine at dinner an hour ago. He looked like a frightened child. Officer, thank God, Michael stammered, holding his hands up. My father. He trapped us. He is crazy. He has a gun. Miller didn't even blink. He stepped forward and grabbed Michael's wrist, spinning him around and slamming him against the metal table outside the room. "Shut your mouth," Miller growled. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted homicide, and insurance fraud. You have the right to remain silent, and I suggest you use it because I have heard enough of your voice for one lifetime." Click, click. The handcuffs snapped onto Michael's wrists. The sound was sweeter than any symphony I had ever heard. Veronica came out next, weeping loudly. "I didn't do it. I didn't do anything. It was all him. I just wanted to leave." "Save it for the judge, lady," another officer said, cuffing her efficiently. "You are an accessory to everything he did. You are going down together." They dragged them out of the library. I followed, walking behind the procession, like a silent warden. As we moved through the living room, Michael tried to stop. He twisted his head around to look at me. "Dad!" He screamed, desperation making his voice crack. "Dad, don't let them take me. I am your son. Please, I can fix this. We can work something out." I stopped and looked at him. "You tried to fix my furnace, Michael. That was enough for one lifetime." Miller shoved him forward. "Move it." We walked out the front door and into the humid Florida night. And that was when the final act of my plan unfolded. The flashing lights and sirens had done their job. The entire neighborhood was out. Mrs. Gable from next door, the one whose window Michael had broken 20 years ago. The Andersons from across the street. The new couple is 3 houses down. They were all standing on their lawns or gathering at the edge of my driveway, phones, out recording everything. These were the people Michael had pretended for. These were the neighbors he had bragged to about his business ventures and his impending inheritance. He had spent years cultivating an image of the successful, dutiful son, caring for his aging father. Now they saw the truth. They saw Michael Brown being marched out in handcuffs, head hung low, crying like a baby. They saw Veronica, the social climber, who turned her nose up at neighborhood potlucks, being shoved into the back of a squad car like a common criminal. "Is that Michael?" Mrs. Gable whispered, loud enough to be heard. "My God, what did he do?" "They say he tried to kill Robert," Mr. Anderson replied, shaking his head in disgust. "Tried to gas him in his sleep for the insurance money. Can you imagine after everything Robert did for that boy?" The crowd murmured. The sound was a low buzz of judgment and revulsion. Michael heard it. He flinched as if he had been slapped. He couldn't look up. He tried to hide his face against his shoulder, but there was no hiding. The cameras were rolling. By morning, this walk of shame would be all over the local news. The golden boy of the neighborhood was revealed to be nothing but rusted tin. Miller stopped at the squad car and turned to me. "We will need a formal statement, Robert. Maybe tomorrow. You look like you could use a drink." "I will come down in the morning, John," I said. "Book them. Make sure they don't get bail. They are flight risks, especially her." "Don't worry," Miller said, patting the roof of the car. "With the evidence you gave us, they are not going anywhere except a federal penitentiary. The judge is going to throw the book at them." He opened the back door and shoved Michael inside. Michael slumped against the seat, looking out the window at me. Our eyes met through the glass, just like in the panic room. But this time, there was no speaker system, no projection, just silence. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I felt clean. It was like lancing a boil. It hurt, it was messy, but the poison was finally out of the system. Miller got in the front seat. The sirens chirped and the convoy began to roll out. I stood on the porch watching the red taillights fade down the street. The neighbors lingered for a moment, unsure of what to say, then slowly began to disperse, giving me respectful nods or little waves of support. They knew. They understood. I turned back to my empty house. It was quiet. The toxic presence of my son and his fiancée was gone. The air felt lighter already. I walked back inside and went straight to the kitchen. I poured the rest of the expensive Cabernet, the bottle Michael had opened for our celebration, down the sink. It gurgled away, red and dark like blood. Then, I went upstairs to the master bedroom. I took my toolkit from the closet. I walked over to the vent. I unscrewed the grill and reached inside. There, tucked in the ductwork, was the bypass valve Michael had installed. It was a crude modification, effective, but sloppy. I removed it. I reconnected the safety regulator. I tightened the seals. I checked the gas monitor one last time. 0 parts per million. The air was clean. The house was secure. I sat on the edge of my bed, the adrenaline finally fading, leaving behind a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. I looked at the nightstand where a framed photo of my wife, Sarah, still sat. "I did it, Sarah," I whispered to the empty room. "I protected the house, but I lost the boy. I am sorry, I tried. But he was broken." A tear slid down my cheek, but I wiped it away quickly. There was no time for wallowing. I had work to do. I had a house to sell. I had a life to rebuild. And somewhere across town, in a small apartment or a motel room, there was a young woman named Maya and a baby named Leo who needed me. They were my family now. Not by blood obligation, but by choice. By action. I picked up my phone. It was late, but I knew she would be awake. I dialed the number I had saved 3 days ago. "Hello." Her voice was timid, fearful. "Maya," I said. "It is Robert. It is over. They are gone." There was a silence on the other end, then the sound of a sharp intake of breath. Are you okay?" "I am fine," I said. "Better than fine. Listen, pack your things. Tomorrow morning I am coming to get you. We are going to find you a real place to live. A safe place." "Mr. Brown, Robert, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," I said. "Just kiss that baby for me. And tell him his grandfather is coming to see him." I hung up the phone and lay back on the bed. For the first time in 6 weeks, my head didn't hurt. The pressure was gone. The threat was neutralized. I closed my eyes and let the silence of the fortress wrap around me. It wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. I drifted off to sleep, not worrying about the air I was breathing, knowing that for the first time in a long time, the lock on the front door was doing exactly what it was supposed to do, keeping the monsters out. 6 months is not a long time in the grand scheme of things, but in the life of Robert Brown it has been an eternity. A good eternity. The kind where you wake up every morning and the air tastes sweet, not because of some chemical additive, but because you are actually free. I sold the house on the hill, the fortress, the monument to my ego and my paranoia. It sold quickly to a young tech entrepreneur who loved the security features. I did not have the heart to tell him that the best security feature was simply not having people in your life who wanted to kill you. I took the check, handed over the keys, including the master code to the panic room, and walked away without looking back. That house was a museum of bad memories. I was done being the curator. I bought a smaller place, a bungalow in a quiet neighborhood with oak trees and sidewalks where kids actually play. It has a porch swing. It has a garden where I am trying with varying degrees of success to grow tomatoes. The locks on the doors are standard deadbolts. High quality, of course. I am still me, but I did not wire the windows with lasers. I did not install cameras in the birdhouse. I realized that if you build a fortress, you eventually become a prisoner of your own walls. I wanted to be a neighbor again. I used a significant portion of the sale proceeds to set up an irrevocable trust for Leo. It is locked down, tight, ironclad, you might say. It pays for his education, his health care, and eventually a start in life that his father never earned. Maya manages the day-to-day expenses, but the corpus is safe. She tried to refuse it at first, crying at my kitchen table, saying she didn't want blood money. "It is not blood money," I told her, bouncing Leo on my knee. He was grabbing my nose with his sticky little fingers. "It is protection money. It protects him from the mistakes of his parents. It gives him a chance to be better." Maya and Leo come over every Sunday for dinner. We don't eat roasted lamb or drink expensive wine. We grill burgers. We eat potato salad. We drink lemonade. And it is the best food I have ever tasted. Maya is studying to be a paralegal. She is sharp-driven and fiercely protective of that boy. She calls me Grandpa Rob, and every time she says it, a little piece of the ice around my heart melts away. I found family not in the DNA I passed down, but in the kindness I stumbled upon in a checkout line. As for Michael and Veronica, well, the justice system is a slow machine, but it is thorough. The evidence from the panic room was incontrovertible. The audio recordings, the blueprints, the text messages, it was a prosecutor's dream. They both took plea deals to avoid a trial that would have been a public circus. Michael got 15 years. Conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, wire fraud. He is currently residing in a medium security facility upstate. He writes me letters. I have a stack of them on my desk. They oscillate between begging for forgiveness and asking for money for the commissary. I read them, I file them, but I do not reply. I have forgiven him in the sense that I no longer carry the anger. It was too heavy. But forgiveness does not mean access. He lost his key to my life the moment he tried to end it. Veronica got 12 years. She turned on Michael almost immediately, but the judge was not impressed. Greed, it turns out, is not a mitigating factor. I went back to work, not at Titan Fortress Solutions. I don't need the boardroom politics or the high-stakes corporate contracts. I took a part-time job at a local locksmith shop down on Main Street. Just a small place, dusty, and smelling of graphite and brass. I spend my mornings cutting keys for people. House keys, car keys, keys to diaries. I fix sticky deadbolts for elderly widows who bring me cookies. I help young couples rekey their first home, seeing that spark of hope in their eyes that I used to have with Sarah. There is a simple, meditative beauty in it. A lock is a mechanical problem with a binary solution. It is either open or it is closed. It is honest. It doesn't lie to you. It doesn't smile at you while pumping gas into your bedroom. Yesterday, a young man came into the shop. He looked flustered, holding a broken key in his hand. I snapped it off in the lock, he said, looking embarrassed. I was in a rush. I tried to force it. I took the broken pieces from him. I put them under the magnifying glass. Never force a lock, son, I told him, firing up the cutting machine. If you have to force it, it means you are using the wrong key or the mechanism is jammed. Either way, force just breaks things. He nodded, watching the machine grind out a new brass blank. I will remember that. I handed him the new key. It was warm from the friction. It works both ways, I said, giving him a wink. Indoors and in life. If you have to force a relationship or a deal or a feeling, it is probably time to step back and check the tumblers. He laughed, paid me $5 and left. I sat there for a moment, listening to the hum of the key machine and the traffic outside. I thought about the Abloy Protec 2 key that started this whole journey. The key to box 305. I still have it. I keep it on a chain around my neck tucked under my shirt. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that the most important things in life aren't the things you lock away. They are the things you open up to. I opened my eyes to the truth about my son. I opened my heart to a stranger in a grocery store. And because of that, I am alive. I am breathing clean air. I am watching my grandson grow up. Self-preservation isn't just about walls and alarms. It is about knowing what is worth protecting. And sometimes, the only way to save yourself is to unlock the door and let the right people in. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I know it was a long journey from the betrayal in the bedroom to the justice in the panic room, but I hope it reminded you that even when the people we trust the most turn against us, there is always a way to fight back if we keep our eyes open. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a busy city, a quiet countryside, or maybe even while working in your own shop? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one of them. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please subscribe to the Bittersweet Revenge channel Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear it. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and remember, always check your keys.